Hello everyone. Today, we're taking a closer look at a document that has remained at the center of international debate for more than 3 decades, the Budapest Memorandum, signed on December 5, 1994. Some people describe it as a security guarantee for Ukraine. Others argue that it was merely a political commitment with no real enforcement mechanisms. But what exactly did the memorandum say? Who signed it? And did the parties involved actually fulfill their obligations? Let's find out. When the Soviet Union collapsed in 1991, Ukraine unexpectedly found itself in possession of the world's third-largest nuclear arsenal. Thousands of nuclear warheads, strategic bombers, and intercontinental ballistic missiles were located on Ukrainian territory. Despite this enormous military capability, Ukraine chose to give up its nuclear weapons and join the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty as a non-nuclear weapon state. In return, Ukraine received security assurances from Russia, the United States, and the United Kingdom. These commitments were formalized in what became known as the Budapest Memorandum. Let's examine what the signatories actually promised. The first commitment stated that Russia, the United States, and the United Kingdom would respect Ukraine's independence, sovereignty, and existing borders. Let's start with Russia. Until 2014, Russia officially recognized Ukraine's internationally accepted borders. However, Russia's annexation of Crimea in 2014 and the subsequent conflict in eastern Ukraine have been widely viewed by most Western governments and international organizations as violations of this commitment. Following the full-scale invasion launched in 2022, the majority of countries and international institutions further characterized Russia's actions as a violation of Ukraine's territorial integrity and sovereignty. As a result, many observers conclude that Russia did not fulfill its obligations under the first provision of the memorandum. Now let's look at the United States. Throughout this period, the United States has continued to recognize Ukraine's internationally recognized borders and has repeatedly affirmed its support for Ukrainian sovereignty. From this perspective, the United States is generally considered to have upheld the first commitment. The United Kingdom has maintained a similar position, consistently recognizing Ukraine's territorial integrity and sovereignty. Therefore, the United Kingdom is also generally regarded as complying with this provision. Now let's move to the second commitment. The signatories pledged to refrain from the threat or use of force against Ukraine's territorial integrity or political independence and agreed that none of their weapons would ever be used against Ukraine. Russia's annexation of Crimea, military operations in eastern Ukraine, support for armed groups in the region, and the full-scale invasion of 2022 are widely viewed as violations of this commitment. For that reason, many analysts conclude that Russia also failed to uphold the second provision of the memorandum. The United States and the United Kingdom have not used military force against Ukraine or threatened Ukraine with military action. As a result, they are generally considered to have complied with this commitment. The third provision concerns economic pressure. The signatories agreed not to use economic coercion to subordinate Ukraine to their own interests. Over the years, Russia imposed various trade restrictions, economic measures, and energy-related pressures on Ukraine. Supporters of Ukraine often argue that these actions violated the third provision of the memorandum. Russian officials, however, have typically maintained that such measures were driven by economic or political considerations unrelated to the memorandum itself. The United States and the United Kingdom have not been officially accused by the broader international community of violating this provision in relation to Ukraine. Therefore, they are generally viewed as remaining in compliance. The fourth commitment stated that the signatories would seek immediate action by the United Nations Security Council if Ukraine became the victim of aggression involving nuclear weapons or the threat of nuclear weapons. This provision has generated less controversy than the others. Since the outbreak of the Russia-Ukraine conflict, the issue has been raised repeatedly within the Security Council. However, the ability of the Council to take decisive action has been limited by the veto powers held by its permanent members. The United States and the United Kingdom have consistently brought Ukraine-related issues before international organizations and forums. Russia, as a permanent member of the Security Council, has participated in these discussions, although its position differs significantly from that of Western governments. The fifth provision contains a commitment not to use nuclear weapons against Ukraine. To date, none of the signatories has used nuclear weapons against Ukraine. As a result, this provision is generally considered to have been formally upheld by all parties. However, periodic statements by Russian officials regarding the potential use of nuclear weapons have raised concerns among many governments and security experts. The sixth and final provision called for consultations among the parties whenever questions arose regarding these commitments. Following the events of 2014, Ukraine repeatedly called for consultations under the framework of the Budapest Memorandum. While certain meetings and discussions did take place, no comprehensive mechanism for resolving the crisis was ultimately established. Because of this, many experts believe that this provision was implemented only partially. This brings us to the key question. Why didn't the Budapest Memorandum prevent conflict? The primary reason is that the document contained no enforcement mechanism. It included no automatic sanctions, no binding military assistance commitments, and no clearly defined procedures for defending Ukraine. In practice, the memorandum relied heavily on political commitments and trust among the participating states. Today, the Budapest Memorandum is frequently cited as an example of why security assurances alone may not be enough without practical mechanisms to guarantee compliance. For some, it has become a symbol of unfulfilled promises. For others, it demonstrates how difficult it can be to enforce international commitments in an era of great power competition. Regardless of political views, one thing is clear: the Budapest Memorandum remains one of the most debated international agreements of the modern era and continues to shape discussions about security, nuclear disarmament, and international law. What do you think? Did the signatories fulfill their obligations under the Budapest Memorandum, or did the agreement ultimately fail? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss future content.